Shalom and good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcasting to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, Israel's Security Cabinet discusses ways to alleviate the humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip, while Palestinian protesters under the directives of the Islamist Hamas organization continue to fly incendiary kites and balloons from the Gaza Strip into Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu underscores Israel's efforts since its inception to reach a peace agreement with its neighbors, yet stresses that the Palestinians continue to reject those efforts because they would never accept a Jewish state. The Palestinian representative to the United Nations calls on the UN General Assembly to adopt a resolution seeking investigations into events in Gaza and recommendations to ensure the protection of Palestinian civilians. Violent protests were recorded over the weekend along the Gaza Strip's border with Israel, with more than 12,000 demonstrators reportedly rioting at 5 separate locations along the enclave's border fence. Palestinian organizers linked the protests to the annual Jerusalem Day events that are marked by the Islamic Republic of Iran, which has voiced its support for the Islamist Hamas organization that rules the Gaza Strip by declaring its support in efforts to bring about Israel's annihilation.
Important today is that on the Iranian Quds Day, the day that the Iranian fundamentalist regime has decided to commemorate Jerusalem for their purposes, Hamas chose this day to do yet another attack or stage another riot against Israel.
During the course of the riots, 4 Palestinians were reportedly killed by IDF gunfire. In addition, Palestinian officials said that more than 600 people were wounded, 120 of whom were treated for bullet wounds. Meanwhile, the Palestinian protesters, under the directives of the Islamist Hamas, continue to fly incendiary kites and balloons from the Gaza Strip into Israel. More than a dozen fires broke out over the weekend, with firefighting teams challenged by dry weather conditions, managing to gain control of the fires after battling the flames for several hours. Among other areas, the Israeli community of Karmei Katif, which is located in the Lachish Regional Council, was forced to evacuate because of the fire. On Saturday, for the first time since the use of incendiary kites and balloons began, the IDF targeted explosive balloons launchers as a warning to the Islamist organizations in Gaza. The move comes after Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan from Israel's ruling Likud party called last week to carry out targeted killings of people who flew incendiary kites, asserting that Palestinians using incendiary kites and balloons are flying bombs in every sense and must be dealt with the same way as those who are firing missiles and rockets towards Israel's communities. Nevertheless, as of yet, Israel's government has not formulated a plan for coping with incendiary kites that have burnt more than 2,500 acres. Meanwhile, at the United Nations headquarters in New York, the Palestinian representative to the world body called on the UN General Assembly to adopt a resolution seeking investigations into the events in Gaza and recommendations to ensure the protection of Palestinian civilians.
My message to the Palestinian people, I said that of what happened today on the ground, of killing more Palestinian civilians, injuring more of them, is a testimony to the urgency of needing the protection to be provided. And I said we will not relent in our quest to try to find ways to provide protection for the civilian population, because it is our duty, it is the right thing to do, and it is the thing that the Palestinian people, including those in the Gaza Strip and in occupied East Jerusalem, they need, and we are determined to do everything that we can in order to provide them or to contribute to providing them with international protection.
The Palestinian call comes after the United States vetoed a Kuwait-sponsored resolution earlier this month seeking to condemn Israel for its defensive measures while demanding to implement an international protection mechanism that will, in effect, grant Palestinian demonstrators the legitimacy to riot along the Gaza border with Israel. Now to Jerusalem, where Israel's Security Cabinet concluded a meeting last night which discussed the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. The meeting deliberated on ways to alleviate the humanitarian pressure on the Palestinian enclave that after Israeli security officials have repeatedly warned that the Gaza Strip faces total economic collapse, emphasizing that the prevention of a humanitarian catastrophe was unquestionably in Israel's interest. Among the main supporters of granting humanitarian relief to the Hamas-run Palestinian enclave is IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Gadi Eisenkot, who presented the Israeli Security Cabinet with several solutions for urgent humanitarian needs. That said, Eisenkot stressed that there were no grounds for taking medium to long-term steps until the Islamist organizations in Gaza would return the bodies of Israeli soldiers that were killed during the 2014 Gaza war, as well as the immediate release of 2 Israeli civilians that are being held captive in the Palestinian enclave. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in an address to the Global Forum of the American Jewish Committee, AJC, underscored Israel's efforts since its inception to reach a peace agreement with its neighbors. The Israeli leader stressed that while Israel has offered its hand in peace, the Palestinians continue to reject those offers because they would never accept a Jewish state.
Israel has offered its peace, its hand in peace, with all our neighbors 70 years ago, in our birth, and since then, many, many times. But I think that the problem we face is this. The reason we don't have peace is not because of the absence of a Palestinian state. It's been offered many, many times. And it's been rejected many, many times because it always had a condition. No Jewish state. That's why 100 years ago, the rejectionist elements in Palestinian society rejected the Balfour Declaration. They rejected the Peel Commission in the 1930s. They rejected the Partition Resolution, which called for a Jewish state and an Arab state in 1947. And they've rejected it ever since.
Prime Minister Netanyahu also took the opportunity to refer to the upcoming meeting of U.S. President Donald Trump with North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un, drawing a parallel to an aspire deal for Pyongyang's nuclear program to that of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Netanyahu stressed that preventing autocratic regimes with ideological radical Islam as their fundamental creed from getting nuclear weapons is imperative.
Preventing autocratic regimes with ideological radical Islam as their fundamental creed, preventing them from getting nuclear weapons is very important. Dangerous regimes should denuclearize. We know that in 2 days, President Trump will meet Kim Jong-un. I think the entire world, as we do, prays for the success of this effort. Now imagine that President Trump would come back with some deal, and Britain, France, and Germany would applaud it, and South Korea and Japan would say that it endangers their existence. You'd think you'd listen to this, right? So the same thing happened with the Iran deal. This deal was applauded by many in the international community who are not in the missile range of Iran. But Israel and Saudi Arabia and others said this deal will ultimately give Iran a nuclear arsenal, and they will use it first against us, and then with the long-range missiles that they're building, and that the deal doesn't prevent them from building, against everyone else.
Netanyahu's comments on the need to thwart Iran's aspirations for nuclear weapons comes amid continued efforts by the Islamic Republic to garner international support to preserve the 2015 nuclear agreement, which provided Tehran with much-needed sanctions relief in exchange for limiting its nuclear program. After President Trump decided to withdraw from the agreement, however, the ability to preserve the deal is more than questionable, with global corporations already pulling out from business dealings with Iran for fear of American sanctions. Thank you for watching us. Praying for the peace of Israel and the peace of Jerusalem. I'm Jonathan Hassan. Have an Erev Tov and Shavua Tov, and we will see you again tomorrow at the same time.